The authenticity is real. The sweat here is real. But I'm really excited to talk about imposter syndrome today and share all the cool findings that I have. So I wanted to start this off with a quote to kind of set the tone, kind of like how they do in yoga. And this quote is by Marianne Williamson. And it is, "Our deepest fear is not that we're inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we're powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us." And I think that's exactly what imposter syndrome is. I'm going to kind of talk a lot of bit about the shadow self and, trying to connect yourself with that. And I think this quote really speaks to that. But before I get started, I want to say thank you, Erica, and thank you, Sada Collective, for giving me this opportunity. Sada Collective is a really cool group of creative individuals that are trying to build a platform for people to share ideas and resources and their work with each other. And it's hilarious because I've been giving them my completely unsolicited and extremely blunt at times opinions about things, and they have never once turned me down. They've been really open to it, and I love that. I think they're a really great set of people that are open to new ideas and are super fluid and flexible, and I think that's important for anything to survive. So thank you for once again giving me a platform to share my opinion. It means a lot, so I appreciate that. And that said, I want to kind of set the tone for what this is going to look like. So I'm kind of seeing this as a conversation, an internal conversation, but one where I'm dominating most of the time, which if you know me in person, that's kind of how I talk anyways as a Gemini. But it's mostly to share a lot of the information that I've gathered, advice that I've heard from people, and personal methods and tips and tricks that I use to combat imposter syndrome. And then later, I want to have some time for all of us to just talk about anything you found interesting, questions that you have. I have a couple questions as well that I can just throw out there and we can talk about, but I really want to see what you guys think because I have a lot of interesting and Dave Chappelle type, I wouldn't say offhand, I would just say different perspectives that I'm excited to talk about. So basically how I even got into this, I have been blessed to know such incredible people, a lot of them that are on this call as well, that have opened up their lives to me and shared their worlds with me. And we just talk about, their creatives as well. We talk about the struggles, the triumphs, the entire creative process. And I think that the advice and the amazing perspective that I've gotten from there needs to transcend my DMs. I think it's sad they're just dying in there and they need to be publicly spoken about. And so that's what I'm going to be doing here. And speaking publicly, so also I have tips here. So if you see me, I'm cheating and looking down. I think it's really important to talk, especially about the struggles. That's when I've really been supported by my other friends and have supported them as well, because that just makes you feel a little bit less crazy. And especially talking about imposter syndrome, which has stunted my growth personally, professionally. It's kept me from getting opportunities because I genuinely didn't think that I was able to even achieve that kind of work. But the most beautiful thing is, even though that's one of the most debilitating things that I've ever faced, it's also one of the things that I found answers for, which I think is crazy. I think there's a lot of things in life that we just deal with and have absolutely no way how to deal with it. Like, you're just completely lost. You're left with your wheels spinning. But this is something that I've thought about and heard from different people, and actually came up with 6 tips on how I just broke down how I actually deal with it and broke them into 6 categories. And I'm super excited to share with y'all today because it's not just 6 generic things that I just kind of found on Instagram. It's actually actions that I've taken, and I have little personal stories for each of them on how I've genuinely used them in my life and they've helped me. So instead of disabling me, imposter syndrome has completely enabled me to do this, to even be up here and talk about it and act like I know what I'm saying, but I do know what I'm saying. So I'm excited to share that. I kind of see this as a grounding exercise. So I'm an air sign, I'm a Gemini, and I see imposter syndrome, it's basically a disconnect from you and your creative work, the work that you put out. You don't even believe that that's work that you actually put out, and it's just hard to identify with it. And what that kind of reminds me of is Peter Pan's shadow. When he's trying to sew his shadow self back on, I kind of see that, to know that you and your creative self are one and the same person. I think that can be very difficult, especially for me. And we're going to talk about, what kind of builds that web of confusion and how you can navigate that. So one of the most important resources I actually have in my life is this article that I try to share with everybody. It's written by this British group called Hack Spirit. And the title of it is 7 Steps to Heal the Wounded Spirit. And it sounds very intense. And it's not so much. It basically talks a lot about your shadow self, which is something that I never really knew about. There's this thing called doing shadow work where you literally work on like the worst parts of yourself and try to figure out like, why are you like that? And the most interesting thing that I took away from this was that to know your shadow self actually makes you stronger and gives you the ability to move confidently about in life. Because if you know all parts of yourself, good and bad, you can never be shocked, right? You know yourself. You can, like I said, just move confidently and make authentic decisions to yourself. And I think that's really important and helps keep you balanced. And that's something, an article that I always recommend to my friends. And I also try to talk to them about, you know, baggage and trauma that they have as well that might affect them or create imposter syndrome. And I like to use the metaphor of riding like a tandem bicycle with them when I talk to my friends about the struggles that they have, because I think when you talk about it openly, I can show the different perspectives and point different things out and make connections. And like everybody has baggage, right? But y'all just carrying that shit around, and I don't think anybody's actually opening up the bag to see what's inside, and I bet it's disgusting, and there's old Kleenex and gum stuck inside and like crumbly crackers, and I think it's important to open up that baggage and throw some of that shit out and maybe keep some things and learn from it. And so that's why this is called a workshop, but I want to really call it a working shit out session, because I think workshop seems like it's performance heavy. Like you have to come away with something. I keep thinking like a woodworking shop thing. I want this literally to be a working shit out session because I just want you to get away with at least perspective, if anything, or a laugh like Erica needed. So that's what I'm aiming to do here. And I think it's going to be really great. So let's jump into it. The definition of imposter syndrome. We're going to get a little technical here. I'm going to pull my phone out so I can actually read this for you. I have a couple. So the first one is going to be from Psychology Today, because obviously that seems like the most verified, right? So Psychology Today says that imposter syndrome is a psychological phenomenon in which people are unable to internalize their accomplishments. And it's kind of like what I was talking about, like connecting yourself to your creative self, knowing they're one and the same. But of course, you know, we all read Wiki article and trust that much more, and it has a little bit more information. And Wiki article says that imposter syndrome, also known as imposter phenomena, imposterism, fraud syndrome, or the imposter experience, is a psychological pattern in which an individual doubts their skills, talents, or accomplishments and has a persistent internalized fear of being exposed as a fraud. Despite external evidence of their competence, those experiencing this phenomena remain convinced that they're frauds and do not deserve all that they've achieved. And then this part is which I'm going to dive into because there's some really interesting things in here. Individuals with imposterism incorrectly attribute their success to luck or interpret it as a result of deceiving others into thinking they're more intelligent than they actually are, than they perceive themselves to be. So I want to talk about the first thing, that individuals with imposterism incorrectly attribute their success to luck, because this is really crazy to me. So my mom is a very successful digital marketer, vice president, very practical, hardworking lady. She's a Sagittarius Leo, so fire and fire. And I talk a lot about astrology, unfortunately, and my family kind of hates it. And they like knock on me about it because it doesn't seem really real, but I'll always like point out weird coincidences like numbers and stuff, or be like, oh, it's really cool that I happened to be at that same time this person was. And my mom gets frustrated with that. She's like, no, you know, you worked really hard to get here and that's why that happened. And I would be frustrated because I would think, you know, people just think astrology is lame, don't want to give it a chance. But I later realized that all of the successes that I have, I do believe that I'm a lucky person. I win at bingo and whatnot. But that's something that I've kind of just characterized that to be, that like every place that I've gotten to is just because of luck. And that invalidates you, interestingly enough, to a certain extent. And I realized why, because one of my best friends that's on here, I would tell him like, hey, I made this video and I sold it and I can't believe this person wanted to buy it. That's absolutely ridiculous to me. He's like, why is that ridiculous? You know, like your work is that great, it makes sense that people would want to do that. And I'm like, oh, you're right. For me, it always just seems like to be at the right opportunity at the right time. And that is something that my mom was trying to kind of connect for me, that it's a tip that I'm going to be talking about, that like the amount of work that you put into stuff matters, and it shows, because that is how you get to someplace. You don't just teleport into the moment that you're in now, right? This moment used to be the future, and you're here because you did a certain set of actions and things, and like may have a part of it, but you moved your ass and did something to get there. And that is what creates that validation for your work and helps put one more stitch of that Peter Pan shadow self back onto you as a person, and is so important. So I love that my mom taught me that, and that was such an interesting new perspective that I needed. So the second part of this, which I thought was really interesting, is that individuals with imposterism interpret it as a result of deceiving others into thinking they're more intelligent than they actually are. And this is super crazy because I just recently finished The Assassination of Gianni Versace, the series. And unfortunately, the person that I identified with the most was Andrew Cunanan, as scary as that sounds. And it's because the way he grew up, right? He went to that private school. His dad worked really hard. I don't know if you guys have seen the series, but basically he's like super handsome and attractive, knows a lot of random interesting facts. Is probably a Gemini as well, and can just get along with people really easily. And people are always telling him like, oh, you're so handsome, you're so blah, blah, blah. And that created this like reality that he lived in, like a fake reality that he lived in. And also set himself up for demise, essentially, because he didn't have any actual skills. And in Smarter, Better, Faster, this really great self-help book, they actually talk about that. So they have these two sets of fifth graders, and they give them this test, and then they take it and they grade it, and they tell the first set of fifth graders that they compliment them on things that they can't control. They're like, wow, you guys are so smart, you're so intelligent, whatnot. And then the second group of fifth graders, they compliment them on actual things they can control. Like, you must have put a lot of time into studying, or wow, you must have really practiced these problems, things that they could do something about. And then they made them take another test. And then the kids that were just given compliments on, attributes that they couldn't control did worse, because the other ones relied on their actual skills, because that's what they realized got them the grade. And I think that's kind of what this is as well. So as a person, like I'm a Gemini, I'm a colorful person, and I can understand how people talk, and I like communicating with them. But just because I can do that well doesn't mean, it just creates a lot of different split personas that I think are even more difficult to attach into a singular personality, if that makes sense. Because other people also shape how you see yourself. And I think that's a major contribution to imposter syndrome or imposter experience and phenomena. Other people's perceptions of you and how they're shaped and how they shape you. So I thought those were really interesting takeaways from the definition. Going back to my notes. So this is actually one of the most important parts about this, and something that changed my mom's mind about this workshop or working shit out session. Imposter syndrome isn't actually like a medical diagnosis. It is, it's not something you can be diagnosed with. It's not a psychiatric diagnosis. It is interesting because there's this TED talk, and it talks about how the word syndrome is actually stifling because it makes it like a singular phenomena, when actually they threw this number out, 70% of people experience this. And a better term for it would be imposter experience, because that's really what it is. Syndrome kind of, I think, isolates you. And it doesn't allow you to talk about it as easily. Because when I told my mom I was doing this, she was worried. She was like, is this like schizophrenia? You shouldn't put yourself out there like that. She works in marketing, right? So that really matters. And I was like, no. And I explained her the definition of it, including to other family members. And like, oh, I know what that is. And I felt that way as well. And that kind of helps remove the stigma, which I thought was interesting. And another thing that removes the stigma, and the number one way to combat imposter syndrome, is talking about it. And that sounds really simple, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, but like, people can tell you that your work is great, be like, no, you shouldn't believe that you're not that good. Like, look at this is amazing. They can compliment you, and you'll take it or you won't. But if somebody else tells you that they have also experienced imposter syndrome, which is the reason I'm even talking about this and realized my own imposter syndrome, I have a friend who is extremely successful. She works for Uber. She's done TED Talks. I look up to her hugely. And she told me that she experiences this all the time, and it blew my absolute mind. And other people that have also experienced this, Maya Angelou has said that I have written 11 books, but each time I think, uh-oh, they're gonna find me out now. And that's absolutely hilarious. And this isn't even to say that like, oh, look, these famous people feel this way, so that sets the standard. But it's just to say that people that have accomplished incredible things also feel this way, just makes you a little bit more human. Kind of like thinking of how celebrities take dumps just like us. So I think that just kind of helps level the playing field. Tina Fey, I like this one a lot because I relate to this one personally, because there's a lot of different types of imposter syndrome, and this is the one that I can see myself. So Tina Fey, in an interview, she says that she feels like a fraud, but the beauty of imposter syndrome is that she facilitates between extreme egomania and a complete feeling of, I'm a fraud, oh my God, they're on to me, I'm a fraud. So then you just ride the egomania when it comes and enjoy it, and then you slide through the idea of being a fraud and you fake it till you make it. And that's hilarious, because literally at one moment I'll be like Kodak Black, like, yo, my ideas are the shit, this is incredible. And then I'll be like, I didn't come up with that, I don't know what this is, and this actually sounds really dumb, or like it's not even gonna translate how I want it to. And it's within literally a span of 10 minutes. So, and then the last quote that I really like, which is actually from that Hack Spirit article that I'm gonna put a link to later because y'all should read that, really unpack it, it's amazing. It's by Carl Jung, and it says that everyone carries a shadow, and the less that it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. And that's why it's important to talk about things, and that's why we're doing this. So another interesting thing to note is that imposter syndrome was first said that it only affected women, but that's because when they did the study, they did it on high achieving women, and then they later expanded it and saw that it didn't matter what race, gender you were, everybody was affected by it to a certain degree through a bunch of different triggers. And one of the most interesting triggers is that when you call attention to your success, that is one of the biggest triggers of imposter syndrome. And I find that interesting because something that I use in daily life is I play a lot of video games, and in video games, if you're running into more monsters and more obstacles, then that means clearly you're going in the right direction, right? So it's interesting to know that when you're taking steps and you're becoming successful and like all of this wonderful noise and applause is happening, that's when your imposter syndrome gets triggered the most, but that means you're going the right way, right? And it usually happens, when you're getting an award or whatever, and that's because there is no threshold to accomplishment. When people say sky's the limit, that is totally true. And that doesn't just mean like shoot for your dreams. That means that you'll never get peace, you'll never rest, like sky is actually the limit, and you'll just keep chasing, and it can be exhausting. And that's just something to keep in mind. It's kind of like an interesting catch-22. And that also brings me to my first tip. So we're finally here after 25 minutes of an intro, but the tips are gonna go faster. So my wonderful friend made me this sick-ass conversation thing. So this is tip number 1, so y'all can see it. Let your past accomplishments inspire you. It's cute, it looks like I'm saying it. So this is something actually that I got from CoStar, shout out CoStar. I don't like to read it because of the predictions, like I don't really believe in that. It's more of the perspective that they give me, and this is one that I get often. So I was chilling on this weekend with my family, and it was just one of those days where I just felt lame as fuck, bro. Like, I felt like everything that I did was lame. I was lame. I felt out of place in the world, disconnected with my creative work. I was about to shoot my short film in a week, and I was trying to figure out, like, I needed a videographer for it, and I was trying to convince one of my friends to do it for me, even though I knew she was super busy, and like, it was just I created it, I wrote it, and I was gonna direct it, and my neighbor was gonna act in it. Like, very small operation. I did one movie in college, barely, and it was just weird because I was so stressed out about it, and my mom and my family was just like, there's no ROI behind this, you shouldn't be that stressed, you're not making money. And they're not saying that to shoot down my creative dreams, right? They're saying that because they're seeing me stress the hell out, like I'm not even sleeping, and they're trying to put it into perspective for me, I guess, but money isn't not the point, right? Money isn't the reason why I'm like staying up at nights, because I have these ideas in my head that I'm trying to translate. But I was just like, you know what? Like, what is the point of this shit? Like, why am I even trying to do this? I don't understand. Like, it's not even seemed like it's not coming together as I wanted to. I'm running into a lot of obstacles, and I just kind of basically wanted to give up, and we've all been there. But, and this is really funny, I saw the collective happened. I was chilling, and then I saw the video that was posted of the conversation pit that I participated in with them. And it's funny because I saw it and I was like, yo, wait, I look really cute in that. And I was like, and I'm sharing some pretty great advice spot on, like, that this is live. I had such a good time. The people were cool as fuck. Like, Erica made it extremely comfortable, and I told everybody about it afterwards. I shared it with a bunch of people. I shared it with my family, and like, it was the livest experience ever. And that opportunity genuinely just made me be like, yo, I did that. And then I was on YouTube, right, because it was there. And then I just searched up randomly this horrific poetry recital I did when I was 14 that one of my mom's coworkers, Mr. Terry, like, believed in my weird, intense sexual poems, that he had like a cafe reading for me, and I had 5 people, 2 which were my recently divorced parents, like a month fresh, 2 of my best friends from high school, and then my 5-year-old brother. And you can like hear the scattered applause in the back of the video. It's not embarrassing, but like, the fact that he just like believed in me, and I was there, and I did that at 14. I was like, yo, Kodak Black has some ugly ass videos of him trying to rap in a young age, and look where he is now. So that just inspired me to write down all the things that I've ever done, big or small, like when I shot my first film, my thesis AT, and then also things that like other people wouldn't even see as accomplishments, like things that wouldn't matter to my parents, right? Like the fact that I moved out as a Pakistani American woman of all people, the fact that I'm financially independent, that I've made decisions to get out of terrible relationships, just things, places where I've stood up for myself. Every little accomplishment, I wrote that down, and I looked at it and I was like, that's me. Like, I did do that shit. I remember. That's crazy. And I'm going to continue to do great shit. And that actually brings me to my next point of how you can validate that. And let me get my beautiful conversation card. Tip number 2. Record your pre-production process. And this is actually something that I mentioned in that conversation pit that I had with Thought Collective, that, yo, nobody records a pre-production process. You always see the end garment, the final video, the final painting, or whatever, and you never get to see like all the struggle and the pain that it took to go into that. And that's something that I've really been trying to do myself on Instagram, like all my stories. I have like videos of me literally pricking my fingers and bleeding everywhere, trying to teach myself how to sew with metal thread. And I will actually put them on highlights on my page so that later on I can look at them and like actually see the process that it took me to get to where I was. And it seriously grounds me, because, you know, you're up at 4 a.m., you have work at 7, you've been getting like 18 cups of coffee, and the only people that see that are you and maybe your dog. And then later when you see your work and you're just trying to validate it, and you're like, I don't even understand how this happened. You can look at those videos and be like, you remember when you were that exhausted? Remember when you had like a complete anxiety attack because you just couldn't figure out, and then you came up with the answer, and the idea and creative process just took you there? Having that proof, you can't fight that. So when your inner voice is like, nah, bitch, you didn't make that movie, you whip out your phone, you look at it, you're like, who's that then? Is this a deep fake? No. So that seriously is major for me. I absolutely love that. Maybe it's my Leo rising, like looking at myself, but I'm pretty sure that like having actual proof, if the Scooby-Doo crew had camera phones, bro, like that's exactly what this is. You have proof. That's all that matters. And that's something that I really encourage my friends to do too. Every time they show me their work, I'm like, hey, are you recording this? Are you saving this? And that takes me to tip number 3. Shout out Brianna, because my handwriting is ass and she really killed these. It is reach out to friends and family members who have seen you through multiple life phases. Extremely important to me as a person with a Scorpio moon. So community is so important. Here we are, you know, Sada Collective. And most importantly to me are my soulmates. This is an interesting concept that you have multiple soulmates, people you genuinely share connections with, and you have one twin flame who's like your romantic partner, right? And these people are so important because As a Gemini, literally, I swear to God, there's nobody that responds or relates to imposter syndrome as much as I do. Like, I'm wearing a different outfit every day. I speak multiple languages. I'm Boxing American. There's like 100 diasporas that go into making up whoever the hell I am, and all this code switching and stuff. And it gets difficult to remember what I am. But if you have childhood friends or even coworkers that have seen you in multiple phases, seen you like grow into who you become, doesn't even have to be 10 or 15 years. It can even be through a course of a month. But just seeing you kind of shift and grow, but still recognize who you are and see who you are, that is absolutely incredible and such an amazing gift to have friend-wise or relationship-wise. Because I have been in relationships with people where they, you know, can't handle all the different transformations and stuff that I'm going through, and it can get really disorientating when they start to question who you are, because then you start to question who you are in your creative self. But those friends that can see you, especially childhood best friends, I have one who comes from the same religious background as me and cultural background. She wears a hijab. Her name is Hareem. And when she supports my art, it blows my mind, because my art feels kind of taboo to me, especially like for my background and stuff. But when she supports it and validates it, it helps validate me, because I'm like, yo, okay, so I know she sees me. I know she's seen me. Her mom was the first person to hold me. Like, she definitely knows me even if I don't. And she helps bring me back to that ground and that reality, which I think is beautiful and super necessary. So after this, just call somebody that you love, family member, friend, or something, because it's a beautiful thing to be seen, and it helps kill imposter syndrome. And speaking of friends, I also have another incredible creative friend who I didn't see on Instagram for a little bit, and I realized it's probably Instagram fatigue, because that's something I was going through as well. And he said something cool. He was like, yeah, I need to see Instagram as a tool and not just be on that. And that actually takes me how I want to introduce my tip number 4, which is check out other people's work. Tip number 4 to kick imposter syndrome in the face. And this seems counterintuitive, right? Like, a lot of people get on Instagram and they get kind of upset because they get into that comparison spiral. And it makes them feel even worse about themselves. But Instagram is a great place to check out people's work, and Vimeo. And this is why, and don't laugh, because, you know, not all of the work that is out there is good. And I swear to God, this is so true, because I was at a content marketing conference 2 years ago, and they asked me, like, what is something that you don't like about the digital space? And I was like, there's so much shit out there. There's just so much trash out there, and it irritates me. It really does, because a lot of it's just garbage. And I'm not even just trying to say that to sound entitled, like make an offhand remark. I'm not that kind of person. I do have big opinions, but I will always explain why. And I don't mean to like shit on other people's work at all, but it's more, I will see something and it could be like $1 million Mercedes ad or something. I'll be like, they paid hella money for this shit. This is on Netflix right now. Like, I could have grabbed a camera and done it. And I think, and I actually then go do it. And that's how I built my whole creative self. Like, I'm like, oh, this painting looks really sick. I want to try that. It's not just shitting on these people's work. It's just being inspired by other people's work as well. And being like, I want to try seeing how I can make it in my own fashion or whatever. But you will literally go out there, and once you expand your horizons and your perspectives to see all that's out there, and then you look at your own work, like, you can either be inspired by people's work by how trash it is, or you can be inspired by people's work how great it is. Either way, you're getting out of your head, a little padded cell that you have, to genuinely see the reality of what's out there. And that makes things so much more achievable. And I think that's really important. Especially because I think it's like the Leo rising that I have, but literally I'll be like, so this person scribbled on a piece of paper, made $45,000, and I'm out here debating if I should post something on Instagram. That's embarrassing. That's something that I could never do. So look for other people, look for other perspectives. Other horizons can look different from a beach than from a jungle. But before you judge others, you need to judge yourself. And that takes me to tip number 5. We're almost there, y'all. It is have a deep conversation about your self-branding. And this is my absolute favorite tip that I'm really excited for, because I don't actually have an end answer for this. This is something that I'm struggling with right now, and has been an interesting journey and a series of multiple conversations, which I think this is an important thing to note. Like, it's not just having a deep conversation. It's definitely not having an answer. it's talking about it. And it's like an ever evolving thing. So I'm not even using my notes right now, which is cool. I'm just speaking, but I should go back to them real quick. So basically, the way that I see this is I'm a Gemini, Scorpio, right? Like I said, I talk a lot about astrology, but I look really flashy. Look around me, there's all these colors, but I have a Scorpio moon, and like I don't want to be accessed at any point. It makes me extremely uncomfortable, and it is the absolute source of my anxiety and depression that people want a part of me or want to access me. And that's difficult because art is an extension of yourself, right? So every time I make a painting, even when I give it to somebody to have in their house, I just think about how it's genuinely like a piece of me there, and it bugs me, and it hurts to sell my art and stuff, and even to post it on my Instagram. So I have been recently stepping into my creative powers. Like I said, I've been sharing it on my Instagram, but my page is private. And I don't want to make my page public because then I'll have to filter my Instagram posts and stuff, and I don't want to have to do that. And it's this self-branding that's so interesting, because I know that my identity and stuff doesn't just revolve around me. I'm Pakistani. I'm also a daughter, and that's really important to me. I would never put work out there that I wouldn't want my mom to see. And I'm really blessed to have a pretty liberal, cool mom that's cool with a lot of things that I do. But to a certain degree, I don't access certain subjects or show certain things because of that. And that can get really difficult and really disorientating, honestly. I even have like followers people like follow requests from artists that I really want to accept, and I just can't because I have personal things on my Instagram. And I know you have close friends and you can, segment that, but I think at that point, like I'm just doing too much and I need to not. And I don't want to filter my work at all. And I think that's what that is doing. But what has helped me is channeling my work through my friends. So I, unfortunately, right now, since I'm recently doing this, like I'm modeling my own clothes, I'm acting in my own stuff but I've found amazing individuals to collaborate with who I just have like the vision. I'm more of like a creative director person, and I can tell them that. And they're people that genuinely care about me and my work and are so excited about it that they can help build it with me. And then I can create my vision through them. And that really helps me kind of create that separate distinction, which I need. But that's just like one facet of this. Another facet is that my brand is MSF, and those are my initials. And that irritates me because my mom used to be like a security hacker, and I'm so about personal security, but those are my actual initials, which is just it's a little bit too personal. And I wanted to come up with a different name, but I was like, that's how you've been signing everything you've made since you were 4. You can't rip your artistic self like that just because you don't want to be accessed. And it's not even that I don't want to be accessed. I just want to be able to show myself from a paid place where I'm comfortable, and I'm still trying to figure out where that is. And that's happening through conversations, right? But yeah, but you know what I learned about the Instagram thing? So since I'm having conversations, figuring out what I am comfortable with, I learned, of course, you can archive posts. So I'm constantly cleaning out my Instagram, seeing, okay, so which one of these posts actually is who you are, thinking about it, because we don't really get to do that, right? And then cleaning them out, and then slowly transitioning my page from a personal page to, I wouldn't even say a business page, but a page that I could maybe eventually make public and be okay with, employers seeing it, my family seeing it, or even just random people I don't know being able to access that. But yeah, I'm really happy that I'm not even having to look at my notes. So this is really cool. But that basically takes me to my final point in all of this, which was the number one way to even combat imposter syndrome, which every TED Talk that I watched, which is like 15, said was that to be vocal about it. So I mentioned this, that one of my friends said that she had also experienced imposter syndrome. And that is what made me realize that this is like a normal thing and it needs to be talked about. And the fact that people don't know about it but have experienced it and now they can put a name to it, I think is so validating in itself. And I'll show you the last part just because it's cute, but that's what we're doing here. We're just kind of talking about it. I'm giving you different perspectives about it. So even if you feel like you've read a definition but didn't really relate to it, I hope that this helped see the reality of imposter experience, which I also believe is a better term, and gives you some methods and insight into how people cope with it, like me. So I'm really excited that you guys were able to join me. I want to kind of open this up, see if you'll have any questions. If there's anything we want to discuss a little bit more, I'm excited to hear what you guys have to say.